All right. Welcome to 15 Query Letter and Submission Mistakes to Avoid. So, this is going to be more of a fireside chat. My goal is to help you remove the stress from the process. First, I want you to think of some very simple concepts. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you're thinking about taking all the information from your novel and then hooking an agent. But rather than thinking about that, I want you to just think about sales copy. A query letter is simply a one-page letter of sales copy. There are three basic things to think about. Number one, why are you querying this particular agent? Number two, what is the hook or blurb for your book? And number three, who are you? These paragraphs don't necessarily need to be in that order, although that's mostly how agents see them. If there's something really stunning in your bio, let's say that you have a personal contact with an editor or a movie producer, then start with that. Maybe you're an astrophysicist and you've included that research in your novel, or maybe you live full time in a vintage RV and so does your character. Be sure to mention those things. You get the point. Your job is to make this an easy yes for an agent, and it all comes down to saleability. An agent will also be scanning your query letter for phrases and information that they can use when they put together a proposal for an editor. So keep that in mind. Especially if you're a debut author, an agent has to think of ways to make you stand out. I do have a current client who is sort of a unicorn. She doesn't belong to any writing groups and she hasn't won any writing awards. But what she does have is a fantastic manuscript with a unique literary style. For her, I've had to construct information for the editors we're pitching about what makes her qualified to write her book. We're leaning into the things that inspired her, and in this case, it's her Philadelphia silver spoon ancestry and the fact that she spent every summer in the location that she's writing about. She's also been combing archives for years and interviewing locals, so that's all helpful. Let's go back to those three basic points that should be in your query letter. Why are you querying this particular agent? What makes this agent the perfect champion for your book? Have you found something on their manuscript wish list that is an exact description of what you've written? Mention that. Maybe they've written an article that resonated with you, or perhaps you've enjoyed their guest appearance on a podcast. Perhaps you've met them at a conference. That's one of the best things that you can say. You get the idea. Do a little research about the agent or the agency. Find something you like and then mention it. Here's something to think about. The agent-author relationship should be fun, both for the author and the agent. Agents don't get paid unless they sell your book. So for them to invest all the time it's going to take to get you and your manuscript out the door, the experience should be a good one. I often invest months and countless hours into my clients before I'm even able to pitch their book. I'm reading their book multiple times, doing quality checks and formatting, researching editors and publishing houses, and I'm helping the author work on their public image. So perhaps when you think about that, it's not hard to research an agent just to get a line or two about why you're querying them. This brings me to the first query letter mistake to avoid. Be sure to address your query letter to the right agent and spell their name correctly. This seems like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised about how many queries I receive with no address at all, or it has another agent's name on it. If an author can't take 2 seconds to find out what my name is, I definitely am not going to take 2 months to work for free on their book. So, in the next part of the query, you're going to be thinking about what is the hook or blurb for your novel. Again, think about sales copy. This is not the place to write a full synopsis. And this is the second query letter mistake to avoid. Don't make the description of your book too long. This is simply the place to think about back cover sales copy and hooking the agent in 1 to 2 paragraphs. Here are some questions that will help you boil this down. What is the setting? Who is the main character? What is the conflict? And how will the conflict potentially be resolved? Again, the agent does not need to know every detail about your book here, or even subplots. This is only the place to make the agent want to read more. If it helps, think about a streaming movie blurb. Would the description of your book make you want to hit play? The third mistake to avoid is this. Don't make your query letter too short. The record so far for short queries that I've received is 3 sentences. Here it is. Dear Ms. Vallance, I'm submitting this query to you for my book. After looking at your website, I considered letting you take on my project. Whenever the time is appropriate, please review my query and let me know what you think. That was it. The fourth mistake to avoid. Don't be too ambiguous. It's okay to say your character's motivations or even give away some plot points here. There's a balance between creating a hook and the agent not knowing what you're talking about. Here's an example from a recent query I reviewed. Book title is the story of the denizens of a space station. The residents are saved from the station's destruction by the grace of fleeting extraterrestrials and struggle to accept the means of their salvation. With inhuman bodies and as some of the only evidence of their savior's existence, the survivors are forced to adjust to strange new lives as unscrupulous forces attempt to take advantage of them. What is that book about? I don't know, and I'm sure you don't know either. The fifth mistake to avoid. Don't be too flowery when you're describing your book. I get a lot of queries that say, this book opens up with our beloved protagonist, or this book pulls readers into a harrowing myriad of events. Just say who your character is and what the events are. Here's another example from a recent query letter. Through my characters, you'll dive headfirst into a dystopian city. This book will keep readers turning the pages while setting their hearts racing. This is what sci-fi readers have been waiting for. And of course, this tells me absolutely nothing. The sixth mistake to avoid. You don't have to use introductory sentences. Some queries waste space by saying things like, please find below a description of my book. Just get right into the description. The seventh mistake to avoid. Make sure your book is finished before querying an agent. I get a lot of queries that are just ideas and not finished manuscripts. Trust me, you can only do this if you have a massive following, a long publishing record, and inside connections. Okay, so let's move on to the bio section of the query letter and the eighth mistake to avoid. This mistake is when the query doesn't say anything about the author. Ultimately, you want to let the agent know that you are a qualified writer. So if you have any writing accolades, include those. Are you a member of any writing groups? Have you been published in any form? Even if you weren't paid, you can say that you've been published somewhere. Every mention of a publication helps, so be sure that you're building your publishing resume as much as you can. Before I was a debut novelist, I spent years volunteering for newsletters, and then I got a staff position writing for magazines. In publishing, every building block matters. It doesn't always happen that way, but it certainly doesn't hurt. But let's say you don't have any of that yet. And it can be hard to know what to write about yourself, especially if you're a debut author, right? So here's a tip. If you don't have anything to write about publishing credibility, just say fun facts about yourself. Something to make the agent smile or something to make yourself memorable. I once had an author tell me that they had the largest bottle cap collection in the States, and that did make me smile, and I kept reading. Some agents will tell you not to include any information that does not pertain to writing credibility, but personally, I want to know about the author as a person. And this is a great paragraph to show your sense of humor or just to tell something interesting. When you're not writing, what makes you come alive? What might you might want to consider adding a line about that. And as I said earlier, sometimes agents will use that information to pitch to editors. And the ninth query letter mistake to avoid is overused phrases. I'm not sure if someone is teaching authors to say this in their query letters, but I see this phrase a lot. My book has serious potential. Usually, when I see this phrase and then I look at the writing sample, it's hardly ever at the quality that it needs to be. So for me, reading, my book has serious potential is normally a clue that it does not have serious potential. If your book does have serious potential, just tell the agent why. And as a side note, I also sometimes get queries that say my book has series potential, which is completely okay to say. So now that we've talked about what not to do in a query, I want to give you some things that catch my attention and cause me to read more. If an author says that their manuscript has been professionally edited and includes the name of the editor, I'll definitely keep reading. If the manuscript has been read by professional beta readers or run through a critique group, I'll keep reading. And if your book has an endorsement from a traditionally published author, I'll also keep reading. Let's talk about some submission mistakes with your actual manuscript. This will be mistakes 10 through 15 to avoid. Here are the main reasons why I reject a book when I read a sample chapter. There's not enough sensory information. This is mistake number 10. If your scene lacks tension, you can always go back and look at the 5 senses. Have you used them all? Make the reader feel what your character feels. Use strong, descriptive words. Don't just have a pillow in your scene, have a blue velvet pillow. Is your character drinking something? Make us taste it. Give us the heat of the tea in our mouths. And as our character swallows, your character, allow us to taste the floral undertones. Take time with scents and textures. And on that note, I need to take a drink of my tea. And my cup says, see the good in all things. And when you're querying, you've definitely got to see the good in all things on this journey. Drinking Bengal Spice, which is one of my favorite teas. All right. So take time with scents and textures. Experience them yourself, and then let the reader live vicariously. And by the way, we have a lot more than just 5 senses. We can sense pain, balance, motion, sense of time, temperature, pressure, light, sense of direction, and more. Humans are amazing. And this is a fascinating study. Google this and be surprised. Number 11. Another reason why I reject a manuscript is that your book, if it's in third person, it's not in third person deep POV. You have to be able to be all of your characters. You need to look out through their eyes. Third person deep POV will do this for you. Deep POV is when you write as the character, going directly into their mind. There is no narrator that's not the character. This also helps you eliminate telling. Deep POV is a viewpoint in which the writer uses language in such a way that the reader experiences the story through your character's viewpoint. This point of view rids the story of an outside narrator. It also breaks down barriers between the reader and the POV character, and we need that. Here are some filter words that you can eliminate, and they are also keys to finding places in your book where deep POV can be utilized. Look for these words in your draft. Wondered, listened, saw, felt, heard, knew, decided, realized, watched. Instead of writing those words, just go right into what your character is wondering, listening to, seeing, or etc. Here's an example. He peered out the window. Are they coming for me? He wondered as he listened to the sound of distant hoofbeats. Written in deep POV, it sounds like this. He peered out the window. Were they coming for him? Hoofbeats rumbled in the distance. You see how that's so much more immediate, and we're directly into the story, the action, and we're excited. Mistake number 12. Another reason I reject a manuscript is because there's too much telling rather than showing. If you've been around the writing community very long, you're going to hear show, don't tell. One of my favorite quotes is by Anton Chekhov. Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. Another reason I reject a manuscript is because there's not enough description. Your readers need to have a theater of the mind experience. And in order for them to do that, you need to set the stage. Use vivid language and make sure your reader is experiencing every beat of your story. As I said before, have an immersive experience when you write. If you're writing about food, taste the food. If you're writing about culture or music, immerse yourself in those things. Have an experience and then translate that experience onto the page and let your reader live vicariously. Remember that readers come to books because they want to feel something. So make them feel something. Remember what Robert Frost said. No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. No surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. As you're thinking about descriptive language, you can also think about the way the words sound when they're spoken. Being a student of poetry, if you're a fiction writer, is a really good idea. 14. Another reason I reject a manuscript is boring dialogue tags. Too many he saids or she saids or he said, she said with ly adverbs. You can most always eliminate ly adverbs. You can most always do a find and replace on the ly adverbs in your manuscript and then rewrite it in a stronger way. Here's an example. She said dreamily. Instead of saying that, show us her body language. Maybe her eyes are half closed. Maybe the corner of her lips are turned up. Maybe she's resting her cheek in her hand. Here's another one. He said anxiously. Show us that he's anxious by his body language instead of telling us that he is. Use dialogue and then bring in body language to show us what your characters are feeling and how they are saying something. The Creative Writer's Phrase Finder by Edward Presswood is one of the best books to help with this. It's also my secret weapon. I love that book. I'm always recommending it. Also, even if you don't write romance, the Romance Writer's Phrase book by Jean Kent and Candace Shelton is extremely helpful. So, 15. The 15th reason why. And mistake to avoid. The last reason I instantly reject a manuscript is a tie into what I just said. It's when the author doesn't use body language. Another favorite writing quote of mine is by Mark Twain. He said, "A successful book is not made of what is in it, but what is left out of it." In other words, a book is not made up of what it says, but what it whispers. This can be referring to themes, but it's also, again, talking about showing rather than telling. Are you using body language to show the emotions of your characters rather than just telling your reader that they are angry, sad, excited, etc.? As a writer, You should be a student of human body language, and there are some really great books out there to help. Body language is a silent orchestra, and people constantly give clues to what they're thinking and feeling. Nonverbal messages include body language, and body movements, facial expression, vocal tone and volume, hand gestures, playing with the hair, flinching, posturing. Also consider micro expressions. Give your reader credit and lead them along, dropping clues here and there rather than telling them what to think or feel. When you're writing a book, remember a quote by Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So, what does your book make your reader feel? And what will your query letter and sample chapters make an agent feel? That is entirely up to you.